So I've been having this debate with people recently, and there is no such thing as a democratic capitalist system. They're fundamentally at odds with one another. You cannot have a democratic system where people are ultimately in charge of whatever regulations or legislation they want to put in, and the popular vote demands certain things of the economic system that are incongruent with what the capitalist system wants. Ultimately, the capitalist system says that you leave it to regulate itself, that the market, rises and falls, but overall manages itself, and that you leave it to that. Any interference with the capitalist system is anti-capitalist. But that directly conflicts with a democratic system. A democratic system does things based on the quality of life of people. It does things based on people's ideals and people's ethics, and that's just not how capitalism works. Imagine a scenario where people decide that they want certain companies to go by certain hours or have certain wages, and they have to be set, and they have to stick with that. That directly conflicts with a capitalist system that ultimately doesn't want those things to happen. If a capitalist system needs to raise hours or lower wages, that's ultimately what is supposed to be, allowed in the market, regulating itself. That's how this works. So that puts it in direct conflict. Ultimately, that's what these new democratic socialist, ideas are supposed to be. That they're supposed to be saying that it's fine for capitalism to have an unregulated market in certain things, with things like iPhones. If you want to pay $1,200 for an iPhone, that's perfectly fine. It's not, that's your right to do if you have the money for it, or if you want to save up or whatever. But there is no competition. There is no way to compete or have competitive rates that you would just leave alone with things like healthcare. Right? Healthcare is a big popular topic right now because we have access to help people and help people survive and live longer. But there can't be any competition for that, right? Like, imagine a private firefighting industry. In fact, that's actually how firefighting got started. It started with a guy named Marcus Crassus, who was part of the triumvirate with Julius Caesar and Pompey back in Rome, one of the richest people in history. And he made a huge part of his fortune off of buying up cheap real estate after he first created private fire industries that would go out when a business or a residence was on fire. They would say, hey, we'll put out the fire for this much. The person might say, okay, put it out. Or the person says, I can't afford that, so they just watch the place burn down. And then Crassus buys up the real estate super cheap because it's no longer wanted, right? It's been burnt down. If we propose that now, that would sound ludicrous, right? That you can't do that. That there's no way to negotiate or have like any kind of real competition in that. I mean, a fire person shows up to try to save your house. You're gonna try to either pay whatever you can. I mean, but that's literally how our healthcare system works. When you go in with a heart problem or God forbid the heart attack or a stroke or something like that, you can't go in and get competitive rates of other hospitals in the area. There's no way for people to compete. There's no way for competition to happen at that level. You ultimately just tell them, okay, I'll pay whatever I can. I'll deal with that later. I need to live right now, which is your main, Imagine if you went into T-Mobile, and they put, the second you walked in the door, they put a gun to your head and said, this phone's $1,100. This is what you have. This is the only phone you have to buy this phone, or I'm going to shoot you. It sounds absurd, but ultimately that's what is kind of happening in a private healthcare system. You ultimately just can't let markets like that regulate themselves because their only real priority is towards profits and towards growth of the company, which is often, if not always, in direct conflict with, the people, with what the people need and their quality of life.